The next financial review I understand members wish to debate is the financial review of the Department of Building and Housing. Will members please turn to the Social Services Committee report? And the question before the House is that the report of the Social Services Committee on the 2019 financial review of the Department of Building and Housing be noted. The question is that the report on the Social Services Committee on the 2019 financial review of the Department of Building and Housing be noted. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary opinion say no. The ayes have it. The next on the list is the Department of Internal Affairs. Members please turn to the Government Administration Committee. And the question is that the report on the Government Administration Committee on the 2019 financial review of the Department of Internal Affairs be noted.
Mr. Chair.
I call Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, this is a government that is completely out of touch with ordinary New Zealanders, and nothing illustrates that more than their upgrade of the ministerial BMW fleet at a time when they're asking other New Zealanders to stomach cutbacks in the services that are available to them. They're getting their cars upgraded so they can travel around and flash new BMWs while they're cutting public services and telling New Zealanders that they need to tighten their belts. And they can't even get their stories straight about it. They can't even get their stories straight about it because John Key, first of all, he says he didn't know anything about it. John Key didn't know anything about it. The first he ever heard about it was when his driver told him. So on the 15th of February, John Key signed it. John Key signed the deal. John Key signed it off, and I'll get to that in a moment. John Key signed it off not once but 4 times. 4 times John Key signed it off. And I'll get to that if Mr McIndoe will just hold on to his braces for just a moment. I'm sure we can get to that. Because he told TV3 on the 15th of February that the first that he knew about it was when his VIP driver told him about it. So first of all, it's the VIP driver that tells him. Then later on he says, the first that he heard about it was when he read it in the newspaper. So we've got 2 stories now. First it's the VIP driver that told him, then he read about it in the newspaper. So we go into this in a little bit more detail. And then he says, but it didn't come as a surprise to him. He told Mike Hosking on the 21st of February, this is quite a good one. So when the Crown car driver said to me, some weeks back now, something about I made some comment about the car, but there's new ones coming. It didn't seem that of a surprise to me because I sort of knew fleets turned over. Now, if you can follow all that, what he basically said was that the VIP driver told him about it. He wasn't surprised and he didn't really care. But of course, a few weeks later, when it all blew up into a big issue, suddenly he'd never been told about it. He didn't know anything about this upgrade of the VIP cars, knew nothing about it, despite the fact that he'd signed it off 4 times. So when, in fact, did he first find out about the upgrade of the VIP cars? Well, actually, we've got to go all the way back to the 30th of March 2009 when John Key first signed off the upgrade of the VIP fleet. He signed it off, first of all, on the 30th of March 2009. Then he signed it off again on the 21st of April 2009. Then the 21st of March 2010. Then the 20th of April 2010. So he signed it off not once, but 4 times John Key signed it off. So what was his rationale behind that? Well, he didn't read the reports. He didn't read the reports. So what are these reports that John Key didn't read? They're nothing particularly important, just the statements of intent for the Department of Internal Affairs. So what do the statements of intent actually do? They only authorise the spending of tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money. That's all right, they're not particularly important. Doesn't matter that John Key signs them without reading it. This is only the deal that basically tells the Department of Internal Affairs what they're going to do. So John Key signs these off without even reading them. So first of all, he claims he didn't know anything about it. Then it turns out he signed it off 4 times. 4 times. Then he turns out he didn't know about it because he didn't bother to read any of the reports that he'd received on it. It's a lot like the emails from the exclusive brethren. He never opened those emails, didn't know anything about all that money that the exclusive brethren were washing into the National Party's campaign that John Key knew nothing about, because apparently he's not very good at reading things. He doesn't open his email. He doesn't even read substantive documents from his department. Substantive documents from his department, nothing much more substantive than the statement of intent. That is basically the government's job. But see, he doesn't bother with the statement of intent, because why would he read it when he's got no plan? If the government actually had a plan, they might care what's in the statement of intent for the departments, but they have got no plan at all. They are totally at sea with a Prime Minister whose only objective is to have his photograph taken as many times as possible. There's no photo opportunity involved in reading his statement of intent before he signs it off. No photo there. Hasn't even got his photograph on the cover. So why would he bother reading it? So he just signed it off. He just signed it off without even bothering to read that, Mr. Chair, and I think that's pretty disgraceful. So anyway, we go along and we find out more about the fact that, in fact, there's a lot more to it. In July 19th and the 20th of July 2010, Mr. Chair,
I call Chris Hipkins.
Between the 19th and 20th of July 2010, it turns out that the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff had been meeting and discussing the upgrade of the VIP fleet that John Key knew nothing about, had been meeting and discussing that with the Department of Internal Affairs, with Ministerial Services, an upgrade of the VIP fleet. Nobody thought to tell John Key, if we believe exactly what he said, nobody thought to tell John Key anything about it. So here's the Prime Minister marching along, totally in the dark, no idea about the upgrade of the BMW fleet, signed it off 4 times, Chief of Staff meeting all of the time, regularly, with the Department of Internal Affairs, discussing the very issue of the upgrade of the VIP fleet, and yet John Key doesn't know anything about it. So what about the rest of the Cabinet? Did they know anything about it? Well, in fact, they did. Turns out the Minister of Internal Affairs not only signed it off, but he wrote a letter to Bill English asking to keep some of the money from it. And that was back in December that he did that. So he knew all about it. The Minister for Internal Affairs knew all about it. Prime Minister didn't know about it. And according to John Key, no ministers knew anything about it. Well, the Minister of Internal Affairs knew all about it. Minister of Finance knew all about it. In fact, John Key knew all about it too, actually, if his signature is to be believed. If we are to believe John Key's signature, he knew all about it. But apparently, no, we can't trust his signature because he doesn't read the things that he signs. We can't trust his signature. That could explain the National Party's manifesto. That had John Key's signature on it too. Doesn't seem to know very much about that. Doesn't read the reports that get sent to him. Doesn't read stuff that he signs off. John Key knew all about the upgrade of the VIP fleet. He knew all about it. And he simply wasn't willing to front up and say that he knew about it, didn't care about it, was so out of touch with New Zealanders that he didn't care about the fact that they were getting new BMWs, while ordinary working Kiwis are being told to tighten their belts. They're having their public services cut. They're having their health services cut. They're having their benefits cut, and there's more coming. Well, there's more coming because Bill English and John Key have said that all of the new spending is off the table. All the new spending's off the table. So this year's budget won't even keep pace with inflation. But that's okay, because the ministers have got their new VIP cars to cruise around in, while the rest of New Zealanders stomach these cuts to services. They are totally out of touch, and they have no plan, but they've got new cars. They don't have a plan, out of touch. They are out of touch, but they've got these new cars that they can drive around in. Whose interests are this government really looking after? They are looking after their own interests, looking after the interests of their mates, not ordinary, hard-working New Zealand families. There are other examples in the Internal Affairs portfolio, particularly Ministerial Services, of this. Let's hear some more. Well, John Key, one of the first things he did as Minister for Ministerial Services was sign off a new ministerial housing regime that effectively gave a tax-free pay rise to all of the ministers in the Cabinet. So now they've got these flash new ministerial houses, except for Heke Parata. Well, he's not a minister, and Heke Parata lives in Wellington. Chris Finlayson apparently lives in Wellington. He's been seen once or twice around Rongotai. But they don't get the housing allowance that all the other ministers get, so I can understand. Nathan Guy lives just a bit further up the road. He got the tax-free pay rise for his ministerial house under John Key's new regime. And of course, why did he sign off a new housing regime in the first place? Because Bill English was found with his hand in the till, helping himself to the taxpayers' money that he wasn't entitled to. So they set up a new housing regime that was going to be more transparent, that gave them more money. It gave them more money. And why did they do that? Because they're only interested in their own interests. They're interested in their own interests and driving around in fancy BMWs and living in fancy ministerial houses, but they're not interested in the plight of ordinary working Kiwis who are having their state house maintenance budgets cut, who are paying more for their early childhood education. But that's all right. The government have got new BMWs and they've got flash ministerial houses. Bill English has increased the spending on flowers in his office, doubled the budget. He's spending twice as much money on flowers in his office as any previous Minister of Finance. So the Dipton Petal has got a new BMW car. He's got his fancy ministerial home that he claims is his secondary residence, despite the fact that he's lived here all along. And he's got lots of flowers. So Bill English is feeling pretty good about things. He's got pretty flowers to look at, drives around in the fancy ministerial BMWs, goes home to his ministerial home up in Karori that's apparently has got his big fat tax cut. Because this government are busy looking after their own interests. They're not looking after the interests of ordinary working New Zealanders.
The question is the report of
Mr. Chair.
I should advise the member that you're only entitled to have 2 calls per question.
Mr. Chair.
Unfortunately, that's the rules.
Such an erudite and incisive contribution.
I call the Honourable Nathan Guy.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to start off